Hello and welcome, you guys. My name is Keisha, and I am so excited that I have time to sit, catch up with you guys, fill you in on what's been going on in my life over the last month. The last video I posted was my aerial hoop performance at the end of February, and life has been busy and crazy, just such a whirlwind since then, with lots of really good stuff. So I kind of want this video to be more of like a life update, and then we'll chat about some of the books that I've been reading. I also have some footage of my recent birthday trip to Vancouver to visit my friends for the first time in 2 years since moving to Alberta. So that was really lovely, you guys. Honestly, I needed that. I needed to be somewhere where it actually felt like spring on the first day of spring. It was, mind you, pouring rain when I got there. And I wasn't upset about that because the moisture in the air and the ocean and like overcast, rainy vibes is very much what it feels like in my heart and soul. And it's dry where I live. So I got up to my friend's house and I was drenched like a drowned rat. My bag was even wet the next day. I was like, why is there water in my backpack? Because I was that wet. Because it was raining so much and I was just living for it. And then the next day, I think it was a Friday, first day of spring, gorgeous. Sunny. I read my book for a few hours in the morning. I went for a walk around the seawall with my friend that I was staying with. We just kind of chatted and caught up, and it was just a lot of quality time with really good friends, really good people that I haven't seen for a while. So my heart felt very full. I was so grateful and appreciative to be there and be around other just like positive energies. On the Saturday, we ended up going to my favorite Ukrainian restaurant for dinner. And there was a moment where I was sitting looking at all of my people at the table and just thinking that they oozed vitality, that they were like the epitome of health. Everybody was glowing, they looked great. And I was just in that moment, just in awe, in awe and so full of joy and love. So it was a really beautiful experience. I got to see the ocean. I went to my favorite cafe. It's a 24/7 cafe. They're littered throughout Vancouver. They're called Brecca. I went there at least 3 times because I'm obsessed, and they have the best selection of sweet and savory, this amazing tuna melt that I used to live off of when I lived there, and so many different desserts, just a variety, a smorgasbord of different desserts. And I definitely gave myself a tummy ache from eating there just about every day, but it was worth it, you guys. It was so freaking worth it. And just to have that break and that little pause, because I'm really constantly just going and pushing and working and hustling. And while I love that, and that's really just embedded in who I am as a person, we all need to put our foot on the brake every now and again. And I needed that trip. It was amazing. I also got to see one of my sweet, magical, squeaky little hummingbirds as I was walking to the grocery store one day. And I just stood there for probably 5 minutes and just stared up at my hummingbird. And then he moved, and then I followed him. And it was just pure magic. Straight up pure magic. So much love for Vancouver and my Vancouver family. I was also very surprised because originally I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get there. I'm going to feel so alive or so connected to this place that at one point in my life, that was my goal. My dream was to live in Vancouver. And then I made that a reality. And what was really surprising actually is visiting made me realize that I love my Vancouver family and I love the people there. I was really grateful to be visiting, but also so glad that I don't live there anymore. And I wasn't expecting that. So I've had to kind of sit with that and reflect on what that means for me. And there's so many stepping stones and different chapters in our lives. And I know right now is my Alberta chapter, and that this is a temporary stepping stone, if you will, until I continue to move forward in my life. And yeah, I'm just constantly surprised how the journey can kind of wind and twist and change over time. And there's definitely an adaptability that I feel within myself of, yes, I'm in the driver's seat, but sometimes we're taking the scenic route, and that level of spontaneity is very much welcome for me. So that was my birthday trip. I then came back home and gave myself no break, zero break. I came back on a Sunday night. I had to work a Monday morning, and I had like the craziest, busiest week of my life. Would I do that again? No. In hindsight, I would not. But it was a super wild, busy, a little bit overwhelming week for me when I got back, but we pushed through. And then this week, which as of today is Good Friday, so we're just starting to move into our Easter long weekend here in Canada. This week was nice and chill. It was very slow, which I needed, to be quite honest. I had a medical procedure that I had to do midweek that was less than enjoyable. Let's just say that. It's just for my chronic health, like my ulcerative colitis. So I'm glad that I don't have to do that procedure very often, but every time I have to do it, which is like every few years, I'm reminded how freaking horrible it is. And that's all I'll say. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty or the details of that because it feels like hell on earth. And I'm just glad that it's over. And I've been kind of coming back to life since then, um, in preparation for my competition, which is literally a month out. And right now, I want to fill you guys in on kind of where I'm at with my competition, because there's days where I'm like, okay, I've got this. Yes, I've laid it all out. Sometimes you make iterations or changes throughout the process, and that's very much part of the creative process. And so some days I'm feeling really good about it. And then there's days like yesterday where I am just kind of having a tantrum. Nothing is working. I'm swearing. I'll just like sit on the mat underneath the hoop in the studio and kind of dissociate for a few minutes because just nothing is working, or my body hurts, or I'm struggling. And I'm kind of ping-ponging between those two states right now with my training. So I know everything will work out, and I know when it needs to be ready, and my piece will be ready, and I will feel strong and I will feel confident. But the creative process that is preparing for an aerial competition is really proving to me right now what the frick I am made of, you guys. And some days I feel like I am made of nothing. Like it's just vapid, empty space and air in my body. And then other days I'm like full of fire and just like feel like I'm crushing life. So that's been an interesting process. I am proud of myself for making this decision, and I feel like it's really pushing me even more than I thought that it would. So that's been a big focus for me. Lots of time in the studio, lots of time training, lots of bruises. I like fell off the hoop on my birthday, whacked my leg, couldn't flex my foot. Sometimes it's like a little nudge from the universe telling you need to have a chill out. But yeah, that's where I'm at in terms of kind of life things, updating you guys on what was going on in March up until now. But I also want to update you guys on some of the books that I've been reading because there's been some really good ones. I just made myself a tea latte with Stash Brand Tea makes this breakfast in Paris, and it's a black tea with lavender and bergamot. So I steeped that, and then I frothed some almond milk and then put some of my homemade lavender simple syrup in here. So it's a very spring-like tea latte, despite the fact that it does not feel like spring. It is like 0 degrees here, and there's still snow on the ground, and it continues to snow. I can't even. I'm just so over it, you guys. So let's get into the books that I've been reading in the last month or so. In another video of mine, I had picked this first Stephen King book, Rose Matter, up from a local consignment bookstore, and it did not disappoint. It really did not disappoint. It's a very chunky book. I think it's like 450 pages. And having never read Stephen King before, but hearing nothing but good things, I was very excited to pick it up. So let's break it down a little bit without giving too much away. We've got our main character, Rose. I believe that's her name. My goodness. I'm pretty sure that's what she calls herself. Or Rosie. Anyways, yes, main character, and she's in an abusive relationship with her husband, who is a corrupt police officer. One day there's a turning point for her when she's at home, and she just gets up and just leaves the house. She just leaves the house and decides that she's done. And it's kind of a very empowering moment for her as the main character because, there's some really, like, trigger warning with this book. There's some really intense abuse that she's suffered from in her relationship with her husband, and she just takes a debit card, the clothes off her back, and she leaves. So, as you're reading this, we're all very excited for her that she's made this decision and she doesn't know where she's going. But along her journey, she kind of meets different people that point her in the right direction to a women's shelter where she's able to start rehabilitating. So, having been in that relationship, in that marriage, she wasn't working. So she didn't have any skills, she didn't have any money. And, a lot of women that find themselves in these domestic violence situations have found their way to this house. It's called Daughters and Sisters. And she starts that process where she's eventually able to get a job and then have her own kind of little apartment, which is obviously hugely freeing for her based off of her past circumstances. And there's one there's one scene where she goes to a pawn shop because she's low on money and she wants to pawn her apparently very expensive wedding ring that her husband had given her, only to find out that it was just cheap and really worth nothing. But when she's at that pawn shop, she stumbles upon this oil painting that really stands out to her, and she ends up trading in the ring for this oil painting so that when she gets her new apartment, she's got her first piece of art to put on the wall. And her big concern from the very beginning is that her husband Normand he's going to find her because he's a police officer and that's what he does, and he's going to stop at nothing to find her and track her down and ultimately kill her. So she gets her new apartment. She even meets at the pawn shop this really handsome man, and obviously based off of her history, she's very hesitant to build that connection. She even gets like a new job opportunity outside of just the being a maid and cleaning at the hotel that the shelter had provided her. She finds this really cool artistic job opportunity for herself and starts making a lot more money. So again, we love that for her, main character energy. But of course, um, with her fears starting to subside is when things start to get really sticky for her. And her husband is a very violent, conniving, manipulative, obsessive man, and he's on the lookout for her. So that's all I'll say in terms of storyline. Actually, I guess one more thing I could add here is a really cool element that felt almost very fantasy, which I wasn't expecting in a Stephen King novel, was this element of another world through the picture that she finds. So that was pretty cool. Was not expecting that at all, and it kind of wove in that fantasy element. But it does get really dark. It does get violent and scary, and yeah, there's, again, trigger warning. There's a lot of trauma and abuse that's disclosed in this book, and it's a banger. It's a banger. I want to say I either rated it a 4 or 5 stars on Goodread, and will definitely be reading more of Stephen King's novels. I still really want to find Misery because I've heard nothing but good things, but really glad that I picked this guy up. The next one that I read over the course of like 3 days when I was in Vancouver is The Housemaid, because a friend of mine back around the holidays, like at Christmas time, was telling me, oh my gosh, you have to read this book. It's so good. They're coming out with a movie. And my reading style is not very on trend, you could say. I read some books that I've heard about through social media that are a little bit more popular, but for me, a synopsis really has to grab my attention. And I went into this book hearing good things about it, but kind of having no expectations, because while it sounds very mystery type style that I would enjoy reading, I don't know. I don't know. My process with my process with reading books is very personal. So it's not to say that when somebody recommends a book to me, don't I don't have the same connection to it as I do when I'm sourcing my own book and like really going through the process. Like it takes me an obscenely long time to figure out what book it is that I want to read next. And I probably have to read the synopsis like 10 times before I order or pick it up or try to find it. Anyways, I'm rambling. This book was insane. It was insane. It was so easy to flip through, so easy to read. The author did a really good job, Frida McFadden, of just making it an easy page turner. Chapters were digestible. You've got your main character, Millie, with this troubled past, and she's found herself on the outs. She's on parole. She needs a job, but she just got fired from her job in the restaurant serving. And she stumbles upon this position that is paying a lot of money as a housemaid. She starts working for this family and finds out that the mother or the wife is a little bit unhinged and prone to these episodes of like psychosis and kind of gaslighting her. Um, and she doesn't know what to believe or what to do, because Nina is her name, will tell her one thing but then do another. And she's got this very rich, handsome husband uh, that seems like, why is he dealing with this woman who's like kind of off her rocker? And Millie's this kind of like young, hot um, fugitive, if you will, that just really needs to keep her job so she can get her own apartment. It's a live-in nanny position, so she needs to get her own place, but she needs to save up in order to do that. And this job and this woman is just making her life a living hell. Uh, and then it takes many dark, twisty turns that I, for one, wasn't expecting. Um, and it's so good. The author did such a good job of surprising and delighting you in the craziest of ways. And then one of my favorite things about it is the fact that that first kind of shock hits you and it's not what you're expecting. Maybe for some people that have read the book or watched the movie, you were expecting it. I was not. And then they just keep hitting you with more unexpected surprises and like crazy, crazy things happening. Um, 5 star, 5 star. I read this book in Vancouver, and then when I came home, because the movie's out now, I watched it with my girlfriend. And the book and movie are very similar in a lot of ways. They threw in a few more like surprising pieces that were a little bit off script from the book, but still overall really enjoyed it. And apparently, this is a series. There's 2 more books to this series, so I'll definitely be picking those up because I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading this one. So, can we talk about the lighting situation in my new place for a second, you guys? This reading chair of mine in the old place was kind of in the corner near the window, so you'd get like side light, and it wasn't always the best for filming, but our living room was really narrow, so there wasn't really anywhere else that was suitable for me to put this chair. But now, because the window is at the front and I'm like here, the light is facing me, I feel like it's just perfect for filming. So I love that for me. Okay, so the book that my friend lent me when I finished reading The Housemaid is The Maid, which I had never heard of, but apparently there's a theme right now. Even in the Stephen King novel, she was working as a maid at a hotel, obviously the housemaid, and now this one. I don't know, sometimes weird shit just happens when you're reading books, and this is the theme right now. Also, apparently there's another book, possibly more than another in this series, but regardless, never heard of it. My friend lent it to me because when I'm flying, I don't like to have headphones in. I like to be very aware of my surroundings and be able to hear what's going on. So I don't watch anything. I am just like, I will read a book on a plane or I will sleep. And I didn't have any books, so she lent me this one. I'm almost I'm almost done. I'm on page 279, chapter 23, and it's such a fun read. It's such a fun read. We're following Molly, the main character, who is a maid, and she her mother was absent. She was not around, so she grew up with her gran, and her grandmother passed away just under a year ago, so she's trying to navigate life on her own, struggling financially, working as a maid at this hotel that she's been working at for years. Her grandma was also a maid as well, and you know, the two of them working really hard, putting money aside in their bank account, but in the book they call it like their Fabergé. Putting money aside there because when her grandma got sick, she wanted to make sure Molly would be taken care of. However, something happened to that money, and Molly's struggling to pay her rent. Uh, let's talk about her personality a little bit because she's a very interesting character. She really has grown up without any friends, just spending time with her grandmother. So she talks in an odd way, a little bit older than her age, and has a difficulty picking up on certain social cues, struggles to kind of understand what's going on around her. And there's some funky monkey business going on at the hotel that she's just not privy to. But she's a maid, and she ultimately ends up finding a very rich, wealthy man deceased in his hotel room. And throughout the book, they're trying to figure out what happened. Was it his ex-wife? Was it some of his envious children? Was it his new wife? Like, what's going on? How did he die? And Molly gets herself kind of caught up in this just very messy situation. And yeah, it's I don't know how else to I honestly don't know how else to describe it other than that. Um, but really, really enjoy the odd the odd energy that is her and how she navigates life. And as a reader, you really feel for her because you can see so clearly some of the things that are going on that she's misinterpreting, but she really struggles. She really struggles in social situations to understand what's going on because she would always ask her gran to explain things to her, and she doesn't have any friends outside of some of the friends she's made at the hotel. But without giving too much away, that's where I'll leave you guys for The Maid by Nita Prose. I actually saw the second book to this series in the grocery store the other day when I was just waiting around for my prescription. So yeah, I'm almost done this. I'm definitely going to finish it this weekend. And then I can't decide. I know The Housemaid and The Maid obviously are a series, so I could very easily read the second book in either of those series. However, I have heard before about this book called Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I've heard it from Sid Bookworm on YouTube and kind of sprinkled throughout social media. And then what really solidified my desire to want to read it next is my friend that I was visiting in Vancouver has read it and had nothing but raving reviews about it as well. So I'm thinking that might be my next read because it is sounding very similar to Water Moon that I read last year by Samantha Sotoyambao. And I really, really, really enjoyed that like time travel fantasy element. I'm trying to expand my horizons this year, you guys. So I think that might be the next book I'm going to read unless I'm able to find another Stephen King at the consignment store. Got lots of time this weekend to, chill out, do what I want, do nothing, do everything. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do outside of having a friend over tonight to make mini egg cookies, which I make every Easter because they're just amazing. They're like mini eggs and white chocolate chips in these delicious Easter cookies. So we're definitely going to do that. I am going to go train and prep for my performance, prep for my competition in a couple of hours. I was going to do, I guess here's another thing I can share with you guys is I was going to do maybe a little gym sesh afterwards as well because I've been strength training in addition to aerial training to prepare me for this competition. But after the training session I had yesterday, I honestly think it's just best if I just like do my aerials, come home, chill the fuck out. I've got a little bit of work that I need to do, but otherwise this weekend is, yeah, it's just training, it's chilling, it's resting with the dogs, having a little hangout and repairing and rejuvenating myself for another busy week next week. Um, who knows? Maybe I'll pick up a puzzle. Maybe I'll find a new book. I don't know, but I'm just very open to allowing this weekend to unfold as it will and not kind of forcing or putting too many things on my to-do list. So I hope you guys are enjoying your time, your weekend, if it is the Easter long weekend for you guys. Probably not by the time you watch this video, but thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me ramble. And I will see you guys again in my next video.